Hi guys, I'm Zara Kane. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do a bit of a rundown of my top picks for the army, things which I think are basically the top performers. Honestly, I'd like to do something a little bit more useful, like actually show you how to do stuff on the tabletop with demonstrations. But to be honest, I'm still working on getting a lot of that theory right myself. Ever since the new book came out, it's forced me to change up my playing style. And now I've got more games under my belt, I'm finally becoming more confident, more familiar with the tactical opportunities that it presents. It's all clicking into place. I'm starting to feel at home with it again, but I still want to make sure my advice is sound before I spurt it out there and you guys consume it. I don't want to give you bullshit advice, basically. So let's just say, that sort of stuff is coming. But for now, let's just talk about the obvious, look at the facts and what is performing well. Not just, that I'm saying is going to be performing well, but other people have been saying, this stuff works for us and it should work for you too. Since release date, I've been forcing myself to go full cult with my list, to really embrace the faction, because basically right through summer to, Christmas last year, I was running maybe 12 Tyranid Hive Guard in my competitive lists and relying on their, brutal shooting to basically drag me through and give me a fighting chance against the big boys, all those armies who just always seem to have the unfair advantage. They're the top in the meta. Well, now we shouldn't need to do that. We've got a codex now. And honestly, I want to prove it to myself. The cult don't need that crutch. I mean, if you look at a lot of the reports coming in from other GSC players, LVO and GTs that are going on the last few weeks, you find that overall it's really positive news. The army is indeed still niche and represented by a small player base, but she's back and she's able to kick some ass. Much to my satisfaction, almost everyone seems to be finally acknowledging that Twisted Helix is pretty much the big boy cult to contend with. And I'm just like, I've been saying this shit for over a year now.
I've been saying it. I've been saying it for 10 damn years. Ain't I been saying it?
It makes you stronger, faster, harder. What's not to like? But anyway, let's make today's video nice and simple. I'm not going to overanalyze things. We'll be keeping it very newbie friendly. I realize a lot of people watching these videos are brand new to the faction and they're still going to be trying to get their heads around what the hell to do. So this might just give you some pointers. We'll be looking at some of my favorite units, what makes them so sick, and how best to run them in game. In no particular order of greatness, let's kick off with a classic, the kelermorph. Undoubtedly, this guy is the most famous model in the Genestealer Cults lineup. He's the stuff of legends. He's just fucking iconic, isn't he? With each of his 3 arms, he's wielding a pistol that can put out 2 shots, and each time one of those makes a hit, it grants him the chance to fire again. So, all in all, that's 6 shots times by 2, you can get a maximum of 12. And a lot of times you will get the 12. Sometimes you get 10 or 9 or something, but it's still fucking great. Now, at first, everyone was squealing about the stats on these pistols because they got meddled with a bit. And most notably, they went down from damage 2 to damage 1. And, that did seem like a real piss take. After all, he's most commonly used as like a close-range sniper of sorts. He was designed as a character killer. So every time a shot penetrated the enemy's armor, you got 2 damage through, and therefore you only needed maybe 2 or 3 to get the job done. Now you basically got to double your luck to achieve the same thing. But then when you start to read between the lines and digest the other changes to his profile, it becomes apparent he got so much more usable. Let's think first of all about his awesome ability to move after shooting. This is game-changing. It makes him so dynamic and opens up a real Pandora's box of tricks. At face value, it helps deal with the classic issue of the kelermorph pops up, he shoots, he scores, he gets left out in the open, he gets shot to shit, he dies a terrible death. Now, you can drop in, you do your business, and then skip back behind cover or into a transport or whatever. But, then there's all the other shit you can do. Here's an obvious one. You drop in, you shoot a bunch of guys off an objective, and then you move again straight onto it, and then it is yours. Don't forget you can still charge after you move like this. So then you could happily hop along and jump onto something like an artillery piece. Something that can't fire into combat, can't defend itself immediately. Let's say Manticore. The whole point is your kelermorph won't kill that target, but he will potentially shut down a huge portion of its nasty shooing that would have been coming your way next turn. The enemy has to either knock you off in the psychic phase or fall back and shoot with it, or, if they've got the ability to, at least anyway. But, basically what I'm saying is, you got to think past the fact that he can just do his drop in and shoot. You got to think about what else is in the toolbox. The best part is his reliability when he does this, because if he drops in at 8 inches and then he shoots and then he moves 6 or let's say 7 of his Twisted Helix, then any charging that he's going to be doing after that is going to be point blank. You're not going to be able to. You're not going to fail it. So that's amazing. Anyway, let's go back to his guns because that's where the real beef and cheese is. First of all, to offset the decrease in stopping power, his pistols do mortal wounds on a hit roll of 6. Now, it's not the best part, I'm going to be honest. There's a lot of reliance in this book on unmodified 6s, which means that Lady Luck better be on your side, because when you start rolling for weapons like this, if she isn't, then it can leave you feeling pretty deflated after you blow your load. You know, a great example of this comes with the Acolyte rock drills too. They need 6s to get double mortal wounds. So many times I'll roll up to 12 successful hits with the kelermorph and none of them will achieve mortal wounds. In fact, in every game I've played with him so far, this has been the case. You know, I don't think I've rolled a 6 once with him. It's bizarre. But that's the result you need to plan for, because you can bet your ass it's what's going to happen when, you know, you need the 6s. You've got to plan for the worst, or at least expect that something pretty bad's going to happen. But statistically, you know, let's assume, to be fair, if you get 12 hits, at least maybe 2 of them should be 6s, and that's pretty decent. The genius part of this is that it makes him great at horde clearance. Remember that those mortal wounds are going to spill over instantly onto other models in the squad that you're shooting at. So as I said in one of my other videos, you got to think it like this. It's like he's blowing a hole in a guardsman, and then the bullet's going straight through and it's hitting the unlucky bloke behind him, and he's, you know, you're getting 2 kills with 1 bullet. It's fucking great. I mean, to be fair, the standard rounds in his pistol did get bumped up to strength 5, so it does solve the issue of shooting mid-toughness infantry like Marines, Necron warriors, and God knows what else. -1 AP isn't exactly great, but it's plenty enough in most cases. Don't forget, with crossfire, you can negate any -1 to hit nonsense like dense cover, and if you can get exposed with him as well, that'll have him wounding lots of key targets on 2s or 3s. Let's face it though, it is all about the relic ammo. The rimtooth rounds, is that how you say it? Wormtooth rounds. These are just an absolutely top tier pick. They're just so plainly good. It's hard to argue against pure killing power, isn't it? You know, especially on a character who can basically go wherever he wants, whenever he wants. You know, these babies only allow for 1 shot per pistol rather than 2, but you do still get the additional shots when you hit. But what you do lose is the sniper ability, so you cannot target characters with, you know, that are lookout third with these. That does kind of suck. And also, it doesn't do the additional mortal wounds, but fucking hell, these hit like a brick tied to a cinder block. Flat 3 damage, strength 6, -3 AP. There are so many targets out in the current meta that are just screaming out to be targeted by this ammo. Here's a classic example, Hive Guard. They come in squads of 6 with 3 wounds each. If you pop up and unload these rounds into them, there's a very big chance that you're going to wipe out the entire squad. You know, what's that, 270 points dead immediately? You know, they've probably gone up in points. Same goes for Custodians, Terminators, the list goes on. Anything with 3 wounds. One thing to note is that these bullets do make his weapons heavy, so you'll be hitting on 3s normally. But let's face it, getting a crossfire marker on your target first is so goddamn easy, you'll be back to 2s in no time. If you really want to make sure he comes in like a boss, you could stick perfect ambush on him to guarantee those buffs. You know, once he's done his job one side of the board, you can just return to the shadows and then pop up across the other side to get involved all over again in another skirmish. So I fucking love it. One of the best things about the kelermorph is that he just works. He doesn't really need the rest of the army to accomplish his goals most of the time. He can do the business in almost any list under any cult creed. Right now, the rimtooth rounds are my top relic pick. I don't see that changing for a while. Sure, I'll probably pay for a second on the patriarch, like the elixir of the prime specimen or something, but you know, we'll come to that next. I'm going to go as far to say that in the case I run a double detachment list, which is actually quite often, I would highly consider running double kelermorphs. I'm going to try it out, see if there's any merit to the idea, because I just feel like I get so much out of them, not just for killing potential, but for tactical ploys. Plus, like, how cool would that look? You know, 2 gunslingers back to back, moving as a duo, Army of 2 style, one with the big rounds, one with the classic auto stubs. Fuck it. I do triple kelermorphs, 30 shots or so, dropping in as a trio. Waste of points? Stay tuned for the next video to find out. Okay, let's move on. Pick number 2, the patriarch. I mean, it's obviously going to be patriarch. So where do I start with this guy? I mean, I've long said, if you're not running a patriarch in your list, then are you even really a Genestealer Cults player? He's like the reason we're here. But all silliness aside, I know there's a lot of people who say, you know, I don't need him, I don't like him, I don't run him, he's too costly. You know, fair enough. He's not everyone's cup of tea. 140 points, yeah, he's pretty expensive, by our standards at least. You could get 10 tooled up acolytes for the same cost, 5 aberrants nearly, 2 other characters, blah, 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 blah. I get it, you know. But I've always loved the patriarch. He's got a special place in my heart. I bring him, in every list just because. You see, I've always been very aggressive with him. I never see him as a support character or a backliner because psychologically speaking, a lot of players will perhaps, without even thinking about it, try to protect the patriarch and keep him alive. Not for any particular reason other than, he's the patriarch in the lore, and that sort of spills over into the mentality that he's got to be defended. I know it sounds funny, but it's true. I even find myself doing it subconsciously sometimes. You got to detach yourself from that idea and just let go, unleash the beast. That's why he's fast. That's what he's there for. If you need a reliable psyker just for buffing stuff, get a Magus. Let them handle it. Stick your offensive casts on the patriarch and shorter range spells like, well, they get mutagenic deviation anyway without needing an extra thing, but just get stuck in. Those monstrous rending claws were built to slay. Don't waste that power by waiting until turn 3, 4, or fucking 5. It's not uncommon in the slightest to field 2 of them anyway. If that's the case, you certainly don't have any excuse not to get at least one of them into the mixer right off the bat. I mean, they do the Purestrain rush tactic. He's technically a Genestealer. He can rush up the board and do that first turn charge thing. But anyway, one of the most interesting things about this character is that you can really put your own spin on him. There's so much flavour you can sprinkle on with relics and traits and fucking everything. I just feel spoilt for choice. Honestly, if I wasn't such a diehard Twisted Helix player, then I'd happily find at least 3 other builds that are equally viable. I mean, let's start with the obvious one though. Yes, in Helix, he's going to be able to get super mean with Bioalchemist. I always like that in the old book. It's just fucking great now as well. It's going to be flat damage 3 on your attacks, going up to flat 4 on wound rolls of 6. It's just another great way to access that sweet flat 3 damage. And then if you have the Elixir of the Prime Specimen on top as well, then you're going to get a decent Feel No Pain of 5+ and exploding hits of 6. So it can just be absolute carnage when you get that boy into combat. Not forgetting the fact already that he's Twisted Helix, so he's going to be back up to his old strength of 6. He's going to be never able to be wounded on 2, which is probably kind of rare, but still could happen. And he's going to be fucking faster. Other mentions go out to Hive Cult. They've got the relic which allows for invul and ignoring wound rolls of 5 and 6. Let me tell you that this is very good against so many targets these days. Remember what I said about the fact his relatively low strength of 5 is coupled with re-rolling all wounds. It means that if you fail to get 5s and 6s the first time you roll against something tough, you just increase the chances of getting some more of them on the re-roll. So that's great. It kind of helps us by failing a few, unless you're against Custodes and they turn off your re-rolls. In Rusted Claw, you can access their Warlord trait of double exploding hit rolls of 6 and the Nomad's Mantle. If you do use them aggressively, you'll be well aware of the fact that jumping out of combat, accessing your psychic powers, and then opening up the target for another load of units to shoot, and then before charging back in is a hugely beneficial, thing. I wish I could do that in Twisted Helix. It gets you out of so many tricky situations. Finally, there's this theory of using him in the Pauper Princes with the Xenoprophet and the Relic of Saint Tendar combo. So this I've not tried yet, but it's on my to-do list, and let me explain the theory, because the sneaky idea I had that might turn out to be very silly, it might turn out to be absolutely boss. First thing to note is that the relic gives you an invuln of 5+, like a bubble, and that's awesome in itself, and basically shits all over Bladed Cog, who basically got left in the dust in this codex, if you ask me. Second, the Xenoprophet trait gives you automatic passes on Unquestioning Loyalty. You know how much I love Unquestioning Loyalty. In my eyes, it's one of the most underestimated and downplayed abilities that the cult has. Sure, it took a hit when they made it so only individual models fully and wholly within range of a character's 3-inch bubble could take wounds for him, rather than a guy you could have strung out fucking miles away over there who jumps in front of a bullet. But I'm still happy with it. At least the Patriarch can do it on a 3+ now as well. But anyway, think of it like this. Whilst your Patriarch has Neophytes nearby, or whatever infantry you want to shield him with, Brood Brothers I guess, he cannot die. He cannot take wounds. Automatic meat shielding. Sure, there's a caveat, you'll chew through meat shields, which cost points very quickly if he gets targeted, and a clever opponent will go, okay, I just got to kill them first. It's easier to shoot them directly because they have lower toughness, lower saves or whatever. Okay, fair enough, easy, right? Well, what if I stick Lurk in the Shadows on a huge meat shield squad? If the Patriarch's up front, always the closest to an enemy, without them really thinking too much about it and not knowing what's coming, they can't target the meat shields first. They've got to go through his toughness and invuln, which is a lot more durable and will deflect lots of shots. Now let's take this a step further. Let's put a Locust in the mix, stood just behind the Patriarch and look outserved by the Neophytes. He makes the Patriarch untargetable for shooting attacks. In my head, this creates a blob that cannot be targeted at all. So maybe we could swap out those Neophytes for Acolytes, 15 of them with a cool icon and a packed out with drills and all kinds of shit. What you could do then is just wait for the enemy to charge into the Patriarch, knowing that they can't shoot him. Then all the Acolytes and the Locusts just heroically intervene. The Locusts can do it anyway. The Acolytes can do it using that stratagem, what's it called? Fanatical Devotion. I don't know. This is just me brainstorming stupid tricks to lure opponents into bad positions. And while some cool players will say, this is a waste of your troops, you could do something far more useful, I always find that by luring people into traps, they just don't know what they're getting themselves into. And this sort of thing, in my personal experience, does work. If they don't fall for it, fair enough. But most of the time, I find they do. So try it. I mean, it might not be a good idea depending on the enemy army, but if you look across the board and go, you know what, they're going to fall for this if I position everything right, then fucking go crazy. Remember what I said about unquestioning loyalty in my old video? Because it still rings true. Think of it like a second invuln save. It's insanely powerful and it can really change melee confrontations when you expect to get your ass kicked. So many times I've had someone smash into my Patriarch, hit him with something that's crazy powerful a bunch of times, and it's like, okay, I made a few invuln saves. Now I get to do my next save, which is unquestioning loyalty, and that's even better because it happens on a 3+. So all of these big damage hits, it doesn't matter if it's flat damage fucking 2000 going to a single Neophyte or whatever. And after that, even if one does go through, I could still have, let's say, the feel no pain from the elixir to just, mitigate a few wounds. And then it just keeps me alive so I can fight next turn. The key to this is just making him work for you. He's a pain in the opponent's ass and they better start taking him seriously if they didn't the first time round. It's very easy to lure the enemy into, making a play, trying to go and assassinate him, Deathwatch style, and then it just leaves them flapping when he doesn't die in the way they expect him to because you've, come up with this crazy ploy of keeping him alive. Suddenly they've overcommitted. It's probably something that's quite nasty that came onto you, and now the ball's in your court, right where you want them, and all your stuff can come out and just fucking main it. But anyway, that's enough about old Patty. The bottom line is, don't be scared to use him. I think the sort of lists where he will not really be needed, if you're going to lean to something like, the shooting side of Genestealer Cults. If you want to keep your distance and rely on firepower, then he's not going to really add anything to that sort of army. Also, if you're going to be rocking a custom cult combo, a myriad cult, whatever you call it, there's not a lot of those which are really going to affect him. Industrial Affinity, for example, it's an absolutely amazing pick. And, it's not going to line up with him. It's not going to do anything for him. I suppose if I had to pick from the default traits and relics, Biomorph Adaption is still pretty solid. I won't lie that Prowling Adjutant can be great in theory. This is the one which allows you to move when someone charges him. So remember that if you move backwards by the Patriarch's 8 inches, you're basically forcing your opponent to fail their charge, typically leaving them with the balls blown in the wind for your counterattack. They're just going to be stuck there. They fail it. It's basically a great failsafe if you want to keep him front and center, surrounded by stuff that the enemy wants to charge. You can force them to go into him as well, and then, that can kind of put them off. Okay, let's move on. We're going to do third. Purestrain Genestealers. Man, did these guys come back firing on all cylinders. If you'd asked me before Christmas what unit needed the biggest bump up, I'd probably have said Purestrains. I mean, ironically, looking back, if we compare them to their old Codex version, they were not really that different. Yes, the stats were worse, but not by much. All they had to do was make a few simple changes, and it shot this choice from being bottom straight to the fucking top. So let's just go over those changes quickly. First of all, 2+ weapon skill. I would have been happy if they stayed at 3. Absolutely mean as hell now. In the past, we had to keep them near a Patriarch to get them to hit on a 2+ because he gave like an aura. Now, he doesn't even do that. They just do what they do regardless. No need for any support from him. And this is just a hugely important factor that I'm going to come back to regarding the Purestrains. They operate alone. So beneficial and refreshing in a codex that is riddled with codepending plays. Strength and toughness remain the same, 4 and 4, but they did get a 4+ invuln as well. That's basically unheard of in our faction. It's just a quick and simple way of saying no matter what hits them, there's a 50-50 chance of surviving it. When you start flinging these guys up the board, you really start to feel that strange sense of durability that they'll get in a fight, probably slaughter their target, piling something else, and then instead of melting to a counterattack, they might just hold their ground. And as a cult player, that is such a weird and uncomfortable feeling. Refreshing though, that's for sure. It forces your opponent to double commit to them rather than just assuming a few basic infantry can mop them up, wipe them out. And so maybe they'll throw in another squad or whatever just to double make sure, which is great because that's one less squad doing whatever else they thought they should be doing, actions or fighting your main force. Now, with the weapons, the good old Purestrain claws, they scrapped the classic rending claw mechanic. They did this with the Acolytes and the Metamorphs too, and just went for a quick and easy, simple -3 AP. I mean, who can complain there? Straight up blender to the max. Enough to cut through almost any armor, and definitely enough to put heavy infantry on their inborn saves if they've got storm shields and shit like that. When it comes to number of attacks, again, they scrapped the caveat that you needed more than 10 stealers in a gang to get up from 3 to 4 per model, which, is just an essential change. It changes everything about them. The issue was that nobody would ever run them in small groups because that extra attack was so sought after. So you ended up spending a load of points on like a 12-man squad at least, which you maybe didn't even want, just to chase that idea of actually doing some damage. Now, you can't even go up to that squad size. It's just 5 to 10 max. And I like that. It makes things simple. You either have a little harassment squad who can stay tightly packed together, nipping up the board, really, ready to pick off some stragglers, or you get 10 and you go for the meaty targets. And it's just so refreshing to have the choices and decisions made that simple. It's one less thing to think about. Because that's one of the issues with Genestealer Cults, isn't it? We have so many weird and wacky options that trying to form a battle plan can result in you just getting very confused. Your brain just melts and you're like, oh, fuck, what was I doing? I can't remember. Not everyone is a world-class tactician, and there's nothing wrong with that. I fucking ain't, So that's the bottom line. With Purestrains, they just do what they do. You bring them, you run up the board, or you wait back for a little bit, and you fight. And I'm sure everyone's tried the rush tactic by now. I've employed it in almost every game I've played. Just see if it's decent. And to be fair, it is almost always worth doing. You just combine the pre-game move upgrade, they came from below, mix it with a 1 CP stratagem, which is called Rapid Advance, I think. If you even do need it. I found I didn't even need it last time. You just auto advance 6 then, and you're right up to the enemy's front door, right off the bat, ready to charge. Just choose your targets well. Don't fling them up the board just for the fucking sake of it. Only do it if it makes sense, if the opportunity is there in front of you and there is something which you would go, under normal circumstances, I would throw Purestrains at that thing. Don't just do it because you can. I mean, when it comes down to what cult supports them best, there's only one really, it's Twisted Helix. For exactly the same reason I said with the Patriarch, they're stronger, faster, more durable. I mean, they say that aberrants are the real focus of Twisted Helix, but I disagree. Purestrains became so much better here, especially the part that gets someone to strength 5. Absolutely fucking key. One thing I'd also mention is the auto wound ability of mutagenic deviation, the Twisted Helix special power. So let's assume you've got a 10-man gang throwing out 4 or maybe even 5 attacks each if you put Might from Beyond of them. Let's assume that almost all are going to hit, and then any 6s of those auto wound. So that's just so good against anything that's fucking hench, and you really shouldn't have, could hit a fucking knight or anything. You just think, oh, that's a massive target, it's going to be tough. But if you just, hits of 6 don't have to go through the wound step, you're just going to see that, ramp up that ability to fuck with them. I think I might have said this before, but just don't forget that your Twisted Helix Psychers always know mutagenic deviation. You don't have to add it as one of your choices that they take, one of their 2. Same with any cult creed. You always know your cult power by default. So, that's 2 and then 1. There's no excuse not to make use of them. Sadly, Purestrains don't really benefit from any other cult creed that I can think of. I don't really see that as a bad thing. It just proves that they're a solid unit that doesn't need the help in the first place. You can happily slot 5 or 10 or 30 in any list and they'll always do their job.